This is Duke University.
In North Carolina, as you likely know, poverty is worse, markedly worse than the nation as a whole. 18% of us, some 1.7 million, are officially poor. As Bill indicated, 1 in 4 of our kids, but 41% of our children of color. Think on that for a minute. 4 out of 10 of our babies, our middle schoolers, our teenagers of color are constrained in North Carolina, one of the most economically vibrant states and the richest nation in the world, are constrained by the challenges of poverty. It's a simple declarative sentence that shames us as a people, that concedes our failure as Commonwealth, or at least it ought to. North Carolina has one of the fastest rising poverty rates in the nation. A decade ago, hard to remember, we were 26th in poverty. When you think about that, just a little bit better than average. This year we're 11th, speeding past the competition. We are 9th in child poverty. 575,000 of our children in North Carolina are officially poor. School districts in North Carolina report that 28,000 of our school children are homeless. 2 million of us are classified by the federal government as hungry, over 20%, the nation's 4th highest rate. 625,000 of our kids don't get enough to eat. Greensboro, North Carolina, you might not be aware of this, is, according to the federal government, the 2nd hungriest city in America. Asheville is 9th. Feeding America reports that for children under 5, we have the country's 2nd highest food insecurity rate, just a shade behind Louisiana. In 2011, a Feeding America study deemed Winston-Salem America's worst city for childhood food hardship in kids under 5 years old. Now, I pay close attention to these matters. You might as well. I have never heard any politician mention these sort of raw facts. Can you imagine being governor of a state with the 2nd highest number of hungry babies and not thinking it's important enough to work onto your radar screen? Now, you might have a lot of different ways of approaching that challenge. I would concede that. But what does it take to become a priority? What does it take to be a central part of our efforts and our focus? If having the 2nd highest number of hungry babies doesn't do it, what works its way to the top of that list? Last month, as Bill indicated, a massive Harvard study found that Charlotte has the worst economic mobility of any major city in the United States. 50th out of 50. If you were born poor there, you're more apt to stay that way than anywhere in America. If you're born poor there, Harvard's recommendation is that you move. Then a few weeks ago, the Census Bureau announced that North Carolina has, in the last decade, experienced a greater rise in concentrated poverty. For the aficionados among you, meaning census tracts where 20% or more are poor, we've experienced a greater rise in the last decade than any other state. Business Insider unpacked the numbers, and they reveal that 4 of the 10 American cities with the sharpest increases in concentrated poverty are ours. Winston-Salem was 9th, Greensboro 6th, Charlotte 4th, Raleigh 3rd. We are the Super Bowl champs of exploding concentrated poverty. Here in Durham, 23,000 residents live in extreme poverty. In 24 Durham elementary schools, that makes up over 80% of the total, the number of kids who qualify for free and reduced lunches exceeds 50%. At some schools, the figure is over 95%. The school district last year here in Durham reported over 900 homeless children enrolled. In Durham's 13 highly distressed census tracts over the last decade, child poverty rates have risen from 46 to 56%. Several tracts now show child poverty rates of over 80%. The Reverend Mel Williams, a friend of mine, longtime pastor of Watts Baptist Church and now the head of End Poverty Durham, is blunt to say, this is dreadful and appalling. In my business, we call it a sin. We ushered in the steepest cuts to a state unemployment compensation program by any state in the Union since the programs were initiated in the 1930s. We abolished the state earned income tax credit, requiring 929,000 low-income Tar Heels to pay decidedly more to the tax man. And we did this so that the wealthiest North Carolinians could be treated to a colossal tax break. In a bold redistribution from the long jeopardized poor to the richest among us, folks who already secure greater portions of our wealth and our income than has occurred in over 100 years. In swift steps, we move from treating low-income Tar Heels with a studied traditional invisibility to a calculated, boastful brutality. From a truce of silence to a competition in cruelty. Before our eyes, political leaders vied for the prowess that apparently attaches to whomever is seen as the most patently dismissive of the claims of humanity and compassion and brotherhood. In the process, we systematically mocked our pledged allegiance to justice for all. We decisively cast aside the New Testament charge to care faithfully for the least of these. But we did manage to cement and bolster and augment our status as the most unequal nation in the world. So these are the challenges that we face. Not normal give and take, not normal politics, not the usual pitch and yawn of electoral work. It is instead a fight for our very decency as a people, the work of our soul. Overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. The protection of a human right, the right to dignity, the right to a decent life. While poverty persists, there can be no true freedom. This is your generation's challenge, in Johnson's words, the work of our national soul. We could wish it weren't as daunting or as uphill or as unsupported or as underappreciated as it is. We could wish there weren't such powerful forces arrayed against it, or if not arrayed against it, so willing to sweep its demands under a rug, as if real people weren't being demolished by it. But sometimes under daunting challenge, it's helpful to think of those who have gone before, especially with all these historians around here. I'm guessing that Fannie Lou Hamer didn't do an opinion poll before she started the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. I'm guessing Mrs. Parks didn't conduct a focus group before she sat down for freedom. Cesar Chavez didn't ask if it would be convenient or lauded when he launched his famed hunger strike. He said instead, si se puede. This is not the first time that people of goodwill and stout heart in North Carolina, in the South, in the United States have been called to fight for justice against the odds. So I hope we'll recommit ourselves to this sort of higher form of obligation. And somewhere we read of one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And somewhere we read that history will judge us on the extent to which we've used our gifts to lighten and enrich the lives of our fellows. And somewhere we read that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And somewhere we read, think of this, maybe we ought to believe the things that we teach our children. Believe them and make them real. And somewhere we read, of course, that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And somewhere, most of the people in this room read, whenever you did these things for the least of these, you did them for me. And that same group read, you reap what you sow. And somewhere we read that the pursuit of justice and the pursuit of happiness can be as one. They march not in opposite directions, but hand in hand. And somewhere we read, no, we are not satisfied with this. And we will not be satisfied till justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you very much for letting me join you. Thanks.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.